Blood stained the fresh snow a vivid crimson near the ravine's edge, a stark contrast against the pristine white expanse. The golden eagle Zephyr had borne witness to countless deaths across these rugged mountains, her sharp eyes catching the fleeting struggles of prey and predator alike. Yet this scene tightened her razor-sharp talons around the gnarled bark of an ancient pine branch. Below, sprawled in the snow, lay a massive grizzly bear, her once powerful body broken and lifeless, the aftermath of a desperate clash with a mountain lion. The tracks etched in the snow painted a brutal story: claw marks, scattered fur, and the jagged path of a fatal struggle. But it was the sound piercing the crisp mountain air that unsettled Zephyr's hardened predator heart. The cries were faint at first, fragile whispers nearly swallowed by the fierce wind howling through the Rocky Mountains, tugging at her feathers with icy fingers. 3 distinct voices, small and pleading, rose from somewhere beneath the towering cliffs that loomed like silent sentinels. Zephyr's keen eyes, honed to spot a mouse scurrying 1,000 feet below, swept across the treacherous terrain. Jagged rocks, windswept pines, and snowdrifts hiding unseen drops. The wails grew weaker, each one a fragile thread fraying against the relentless cold, a sound that spoke of innocence teetering on the brink of death. Most eagles would have turned away, their instincts driving them to hunt rabbits darting through the underbrush or fish glinting in the streams below, unconcerned with the fates of others. But Zephyr was no ordinary eagle. 20 seasons of reigning over these skies had carved a wisdom into her spirit, a subtle understanding that nature's rigid laws could, at times, be bent, if not wholly broken. Tilting her wings, she glided lower, riding the thermal currents that swirled up from the valleys, her shadow rippling over the snow like a dark omen. As she descended, the source of those haunting cries came into focus. Huddled within a shallow cave gouged into the cliff face, 3 tiny bear cubs trembled against the stone. Their black fur, dusted with clinging snowflakes, shimmered faintly in the dim light filtering through the entrance. Their eyes, barely cracked open to the harsh world they'd been thrust into, reflected a raw vulnerability. No larger than the mountain hares Zephyr typically hunted, they were pitifully small. Yet something about their helpless, shivering forms struck a deep, unfamiliar chord within her warrior's soul. Without their mother, whose broken body lay above, they stood no chance against the brutal mountain night creeping closer. The temperature was already plunging, the air growing sharp and biting, while the distant, mournful songs of hungry wolves rose from the shadowed valleys below, a chilling promise of what awaited the unprotected. Zephyr perched on a jagged outcrop, her feathers ruffling in the wind, facing a choice that defied the natural order she'd always known. Eagles and bears were ancient adversaries, their territories carved apart by instinct, their encounters marked by wary tension or outright conflict. Yet, as the sun dipped behind the snow-capped peaks, bathing the landscape in a blood-red glow that mirrored the stained snow, Zephyr felt an inexplicable pull. The cubs' cries grew fainter, their small bodies curling tighter together for warmth, their breath forming fleeting clouds in the frigid air. Time was slipping away like sand through her talons. Above, storm clouds gathered, their dark edges swelling ominously, promising a night of unrelenting cold and peril. In that moment, Zephyr spread her magnificent wings, broad and golden, catching the last rays of fading light, and did something no eagle had ever done before. She descended into the cave, her talons clicking softly against the stone, and gathered the cubs beneath her feathers. That first night under her wings changed everything. The 3 tiny cubs pressed against her, their cries softening into gentle whimpers as her warmth shielded them from death's grasp. Zephyr stayed awake through the endless hours, her fierce amber eyes piercing the darkness beyond the cave, scanning for any threat, wolf, wind, or shadow, that might dare approach her newfound family. The wind howled outside, rattling loose stones and sending snow swirling. But within the cave, a fragile stillness settled. By dawn, as pale light crept over the horizon, she'd made a silent vow to protect these little ones, no matter the trials ahead. The first month tested every shred of Zephyr's ingenuity and resolve. She quickly learned that each cub bore distinct needs, their personalities emerging even in their frailty. Torek, the largest, was a bundle of restless energy, his hunger insatiable. His demands doubled Zephyr's hunting trips to the river, where she'd snatch fish from the icy currents with deft precision. His appetite soon drove him to try solid food, his tiny jaws eagerly tearing at the silvery offerings she dropped before him, his growls of satisfaction echoing faintly in the cave. Lyra, more cautious and gentle, preferred a slower approach. She'd wait patiently, her soft eyes watching as Zephyr broke the fish into smaller, manageable pieces, accepting them with a delicate nudge of her snout. Cain, the smallest and most fragile, struggled most in those early days. His weak frame demanded tender morsels, forcing Zephyr to scour the streams for the softest, juiciest bits she could find, her wings tiring from the extra flights. As spring thawed the mountains and summer bloomed across the valleys, Zephyr discovered that raising bear cubs required more than mere sustenance. She had to teach them the mountain itself, its rhythms, its dangers, its secrets. When thunder rumbled through the peaks, shaking the stone beneath their paws, the cubs would tremble in terror, their whimpers rising in chorus. Zephyr learned to spread her wings over them, her steady presence a shield against the chaos, letting them feel her calm as lightning fractured the sky. Over time, they began to mirror her stillness, their shaking easing as they learned fear could be tamed. Their first steps beyond the cave became lessons in courage, tentative paws crunching on snow-dusted stone. Zephyr stood at the entrance, her soft eagle calls, a rare, melodic trill, urging them forward. Torek always ventured out first, his bold curiosity overcoming hesitation, his head swiveling to take in the vast world. Lyra followed, her steps deliberate, testing the ground with care. Cain, though timid, scrambled after them, his determination outweighing his fear of being left behind. Each small victory, from scaling their first jagged rock to lapping water from the rushing stream, was met with gentle nuzzles against Zephyr's feathers, a bond deepening with every shared moment. Most remarkable was how they began to emulate their eagle mother. When Zephyr tilted her head to catch distant sounds, the rustle of leaves or a wolf's howl, the cubs mirrored her, their ears twitching as they deciphered the mountain's voices. They watched her ride the wind, feeling its shifts before storms, their noses lifting to sniff the changing air. Without realizing it, they were learning to perceive the world through the dual lenses of bear and eagle, a fusion of instincts no creature had ever blended before. By the time autumn draped the mountains in a tapestry of gold and crimson, the cubs had grown into sturdy young bears, their bodies thickening with muscle, yet their movements carried a unique grace. They prowled low to the ground like bears, but their heads often tilted skyward, tracking Zephyr as she soared above, her golden form a constant beacon. Other animals began to notice something different about these three. The way they paused to feel the wind's caress, their subtle gestures echoing eagle habits, and most astonishingly, the soft calling sounds they made, eerily akin to Zephyr's cry. These weren't mere bear grunts but a melodic resonance that drifted through the peaks. No one could know then that these early days of learning and love were laying the foundation for something truly extraordinary. As winter loomed and the cubs grew stronger, Zephyr sensed their unique bond was merely the prelude to a miracle beyond imagination. 2 winters passed in the Rocky Mountains, each season sculpting remarkable changes in her unconventional family. Torek, Lyra, and Cain had matured into young bears of exceptional size and strength, their muscles hardened by scaling the highest peaks alongside their eagle mother, their paws leaving deep prints in the snow. Yet it wasn't their physical prowess that made other animals halt and stare in quiet wonder. It was something far more extraordinary, a presence that defied the norms of their kind. The 3 bears navigated the mountain world with an awareness that seemed impossible for creatures of their bulk. When avalanches rumbled on distant slopes, they'd pause, lifting their heads to the wind, reading air currents with the precision Zephyr had instilled. Their massive forms would grow still, heads cocked slightly, before they lumbered off, guiding other bears away from peril with an unspoken authority. Mountain goats, nimble and wary, learned to shadow these strange bears when storms brewed, trusting their lead. Torek had grown into a towering figure, his black fur shimmering with silver streaks in the sunlight. He developed an uncanny knack for predicting weather shifts, often standing on high ridges, face to the wind, emitting soft eagle-like calls that reverberated through the valleys. Younger bears gathered at a safe distance, watching in awe as he seemed to converse with the eagles wheeling overhead, a dialogue woven of instinct and air. Lyra, true to her name, had mastered the art of moving silently through the morning fogs that cloaked the peaks. Known among mountain creatures as the gentle guardian, she was often glimpsed guiding injured animals, foxes with twisted paws, birds with battered wings, to shelter during storms. Her favorite perch was a broad, flat rock overlooking the river where she'd sit beside Zephyr, both gazing at the water's flow with identical focus, their silhouettes a study in harmony that defied nature's rules. Cain, though still the smallest, had honed abilities that left even Zephyr in awe. He could mimic her warning cry so flawlessly that other birds responded, their calls intertwining with his. On quiet evenings, he'd sit with his siblings, crafting sounds that bridged bear and eagle, a haunting melody that floated through the mountain air, stirring the stillness. As their second year drew to a close, subtle signs of change rippled through the mountains. Winds carried unfamiliar scents, sharp and foreboding, and clouds gathered in strange, heavy patterns, their edges tinged with an ominous gray. Zephyr sensed something approaching, a trial that would test everything she'd taught her children. Other eagles felt it too, growing restless in their nests, their cries sharper and more urgent than usual. One evening, as the sun bled the sky a deep crimson, Zephyr perched on their favorite cliff edge, her 3 bears beside her. They'd grown so large that she now seemed diminutive in their shadow, yet they still turned to her for guidance. Toruk, Lyra, and Cain sat in perfect stillness, their eyes locked on the horizon where dark clouds swelled, unaware that their unique skills were about to face a crucible that would reveal the full miracle of their bond. 2 years to the day after Zephyr found those crying cubs, something extraordinary unfolded in the Rocky Mountains. Toruk, Lyra, and Cain were now young adult bears, distinct from any the wilderness had known. They remained tethered to Zephyr, never straying far from her watchful gaze, their lives interwoven with hers. That morning, Zephyr swooped down to her usual perch, a weathered slab of stone overlooking the valley, but something was amiss. Her left wing hung awkwardly, injured, likely from a fierce skirmish with another eagle defending her territory. She tried to take flight, her talons scraping the rock, but stumbled, her body tilting perilously toward the jagged rocks below. What happened next left even the oldest mountain animals, grizzled wolves and weathered goats, speechless, their breaths caught in the frosty air. The 3 bears, who'd been watching their mother's flight as they did each day, sprang into action with a coordination that belied their size. Instead of lumbering on all fours as bears typically do, they moved with an uncanny grace, their bodies low to the ground, attuned to the wind currents Zephyr had taught them to read. Toruk positioned himself directly beneath her falling form, his broad shoulders braced to break her descent. Lyra and Cain raced to higher points on the ridge, their paws gripping the stone with practiced ease. Then came the sound that shifted the mountain's heartbeat. They raised their heads and called out, not with the deep roar of bears, but with a piercing, perfect eagle's cry. It was the same cry they'd made as cubs, now amplified with power and purpose, resonating for miles across the peaks. Other eagles, hearing the familiar call, arrived one by one, their wings slicing through the stormy sky. They recognized these bears, known throughout the territory as Zephyr's children, marked by their strange harmony with the air. What followed surpassed anything the mountain had witnessed. The bears and eagles worked in seamless unity, forming a protective circle around their injured mother. They understood flight patterns and wind so intimately that they guided the eagles to weave air currents, softening Zephyr's fall until she glided safely to the ground, her feathers brushing the snow. But the true miracle blossomed in the days that followed. Toruk, Lyra, and Cain stayed by Zephyr's side as she healed, their massive forms a steadfast guard around her perch. Then something remarkable began. Other injured eagles, typically solitary and secretive in their pain, sought them out. The 3 bears could sense where wings were broken or feathers torn, using their gentle strength to steady the birds while they mended. Toruk held a trembling eagle still as Lyra nudged it into a sheltered nook. Cain's soft calls reassured another as it rested against his flank. They became bridges between ground and sky, healing an ancient rift between bears and eagles with a tenderness born of their upbringing. The incredible event 2 years after Zephyr found those crying cubs wasn't just about saving her, it rewrote the mountain's very nature. These bears became guardians of both earth and sky, earning the trust of creatures who'd been enemies for generations. Their ability to commune with eagles, forged in those early days under Zephyr's wing, wove a new harmony into the wilderness. Word spread through the Rocky Mountains, whispers on the wind of bears who spoke to eagles, who understood the language of the sky yet remained rooted to the earth. Zephyr's decision to shelter 3 crying cubs hadn't just saved their lives, it had birthed a new order, blending ground and air, bear and bird, the possible and the impossible. One crisp autumn morning, 5 years after Zephyr first heard those cries, a familiar sound drifted through the valleys, a lone bear cub's wail, its fear and desperation echoing off the rocky walls. It stirred something deep in Torek, Lyra, and Cain, who'd been tending an injured golden eagle in their healing cave, a sheltered hollow they'd claimed as a sanctuary. The eagle's wing was bandaged with moss they'd gathered, its breathing steady under their care. The cub's cry reached them, tugging at memories of their own fragile beginnings. Zephyr, perched on her favorite outcrop, a weathered spur of stone overlooking the vast expanse, gave a gentle cry, her voice threading through the wind. Her children, now massive adult bears with healing powers legendary across the Rockies, understood instantly. This was a moment of destiny, a chance to complete the circle begun with their own rescue. Torek took the lead, his powerful form moving with surprising grace through the forest, his eagle-sharpened senses tracking the sound's origin, a rustle here, a faint echo there. Lyra followed, her gentle presence a quiet promise of comfort, her paws leaving soft impressions in the mossy earth. Cain brought up the rear, occasionally lifting his head to call out with his flawless eagle cry, a beacon for Zephyr soaring above, her golden wings cutting through the crisp air. They found the cub huddled beneath a fallen pine, its splintered trunk a makeshift shield against the morning chill. It was a tiny black bear, mere weeks old, its eyes wide with fear and loneliness, its body shivering in the shadows. The 3 bears surrounded it with the same tender care Zephyr had once shown them. Cain made soft, reassuring sounds, those melodic trills they'd learned from their eagle mother, while Lyra approached with the patience she used for injured birds, her snout low and non-threatening. Zephyr descended from above, her wings spreading wide in that same protective gesture from years ago, casting a shadow that enveloped the cub in warmth. The little bear looked up in wonder, its trembling easing as it took in the sight of 3 enormous bears and an eagle moving in perfect harmony. Torek gently nudged it with his nose, coaxing it from its hiding place, and to everyone's astonishment, the tiny cub responded with a sound that was neither bear nor eagle, but a curious, quavering blend of both, a new voice born of their union. That evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, a remarkable sight filled the healing cave. 4 bears, 1 tiny and 3 grown, sat in peaceful companionship with a majestic eagle. Torek rested a paw near the cub, steadying it as it nestled against Lyra's flank. Cain sat watchfully nearby, his eyes glinting with quiet pride. Zephyr perched above, her feathers ruffling softly in the breeze. Their calls joined in the twilight, a symphony of love weaving bear growls, eagle cries, and the cub's fragile notes into a melody that echoed through the valleys. It told all who heard it that the most incredible miracles are those that keep giving, growing, and reshaping the world one heart at a time, a testament to a bond that defied nature's oldest boundaries. We hope this extraordinary tale of Zephyr and her 3 bear cubs touched your heart. If their story of unconditional love and shattering nature's divides moved you, share your thoughts below. What would you do if you found someone in need, even if they were entirely different from you? Reflect in the comments, your words might inspire others. Have you witnessed unlikely friendships in nature? Tell us your stories, we're eager to hear them. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales that remind us love knows no bounds. And like and share the story to spread its powerful message of hope and family. Sometimes, the most incredible things happen when we open our hearts to unexpected possibilities. Join our community of nature lovers and storytellers, where we celebrate the magical connections that make our world truly extraordinary, because every tale like this weaves us closer together.